So good morning, I'm Jane Morgan and welcome to the DroneShield Investor Webinar. To take us through the company investor presentation and answer shareholder questions, today I am joined by DroneShield's CEO, Oleg Vornik. To ask a question throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. A recording of this webinar will also be available online tomorrow on www.droneshield.com/investors. I will now hand you over to Oleg to run through the presentation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Oleg Vornik. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of DroneShield. Today, I will run you through our presentation that we released with our second quarter results yesterday. The presentation will take approximately 15 minutes, followed by Q&A. I will now turn to the presentation. Yesterday, we have released our highest quarterly and half-annual result to date. That has included approximately 9.1 million of customer cash receipts for the June half year, as well as 7.3 million of customer cash receipts for the quarter. Importantly, we have continued to increase the breadth and diversity in the quality of our customers, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. The key highlights for the first half of the year and going into the second half of the year are as follows. We have a $200 million sales pipeline with the growing focus towards Australia and in the US. Traditionally, as you would know, we have approximately 120 countries around the world where we do business, and we're continuing to do so. However, in the US and Australia, where we have on-the-ground teams, as long as UK, we have a high degree of transparency into the customer, and the predictability of the customer cash receipts continues to increase as we spend more and more time in those markets. Middle East continues to be a key market for us, which I'll turn to in a second. We have achieved a $3.8 million contract with the Australian Department of Defence. That has followed on a $600,000 contract that we have received approximately 6 months ago and successfully closed. Importantly, $1.9 million initial payment was received in June 21, last month, which shows to the strength of the relationship with the customer. The contract is an electronic warfare signals intelligence space. This is a logical extension of the counter-drone space with very wide applications in today's world, where electronic warfare is a key part of gray zone warfare, asymmetric warfare, and much else. We have accumulated approximately $10 million in inventory by sale value on hand. This is for 2 reasons. Firstly, a lot of our customers often require quick delivery, and being able to make that delivery can be difference between a sale or no sale. Also, as some of you may have seen, we are experiencing global semiconductor and other critical electrical component shortages. So having that inventory on hand enables us to mitigate those disruptions. DroneShield continues to experience favorable macroeconomic environment despite the COVID restrictions. We are seeing rising counter-drone expenditure globally, as well as in Australia, where the government has committed to a $270 billion expense over the next 10 years to invest in defense capability, and specifically have as much of it done locally under the AIC program, where they're trying to foster the local defense business. We have completed the scale up of the team. That included approximately 50 staff across Australia, US, and UK, with about 40 in Australia and overall about 30 engineers. We're continuing additional hiring on opportunistic basis where it makes sense. We are confident in our ability to attract best and brightest as we go. In terms of our financial snapshot, I already talked about our strong revenue outlook of approximately 200 million of cash receipts forecasted between now and December 2022. This is on a risk unweighted basis, meaning we do not attach risk weighting to specific opportunities. However, there are quite a number of opportunities there, so approximately 200 opportunities worth across different regions. Again, as I mentioned, significant focus is becoming on the US, Australia, and continued focus on the Middle East. So we are confident that even though things sometimes might get delayed or plans change, the sheer amount of opportunity in front of us will ensure that as we go into the second half of the year, we'll continue to grow and exceed our results for the first half of the year. As I mentioned, we have received 7.3 million in customer cash receipts in the second quarter, which is our all-time record by a factor. We have ended the quarter with a cash balance of approximately $14 million. We have a clean balance sheet with no debt or convertibles on it, with high contract wins, both in terms of the number and the quality of the customers. Our customers are literally who's who of the defense industry and the government agencies globally. Importantly, as we grow our business, we continue increasing focus on the software and the subscription as a service space. As drones and other threats continue to evolve, our customers require us to provide them with regular updates that we charge subscription services for, so increasing amount of our revenue is becoming on a recurring basis and software driven. Now we'll turn to our pipeline. Middle East continues to be a single major opportunity focus for us, where we have a US $50 million opportunity, our third project with that particular customer that we're working on. While in that market, it is difficult to forecast the exact timing, we are having an active engagement with that customer. And as I mentioned, we have successful track record of completing first 2 contracts and being fully paid for those contracts, which is somewhat of an unusual thing and stands us apart and talks to the relationship with our customer in that market as we continue active discussions on the third, and they really have a need for our products. US and Australia, as I mentioned, are key areas for us where we have dozens of opportunities across government, military and law enforcement opportunities, and we have on-the-ground teams directly engaging with those customers. UK has been somewhat slow for us due to COVID restrictions. However, now as the restrictions are coming off, we're engaging both with our small on-the-ground team and BT's sales team with defense and other customers in UK, and we expect to start closing sales in increasing amounts to what we have been doing recently. Europe and the rest of the world have continued to be good in terms of continuing to close sales and have increasing amounts of those. And for example, we previously talked about our engagement with the French army, and some of you may have seen pictures around that, and also our work with the European Union Police, the 4-year framework agreement for the drone gun tactical units. The next slide talks about predictability of cash receipts. Being a small company dealing on a global stage, we deal with in-country distributors across most of the markets that we operate in. However, in Australia and the US, as well as UK, we have our own teams, as we believe that these are the regions where in the long term we'll be most driven, getting most of our revenues from. And as you see the evolution of our cash receipts, it's been becoming larger and larger from balance from all around the world, now being more and more concentrated towards Australia and the US, where we have much greater visibility on the timing and the nature of the cash receipts, and also Middle East continued to be our focus, and we have a track record of delivering and getting paid in the Middle East as well. The next slide deals with repeat versus first-time customer cash receipts. Those of you who have been involved in defense markets will know that defense customers have a long acquisition cycle to first purchase compared to, say, consumer markets. However, are a committed customer and work collaboratively with the industry once they're on board. As you can see in gray versus orange bars, we have been radically increasing the amount of our repeat customers, and those customers are the ones that we have closer relationships as we evolve and have more predictable revenue streams from. So the overall purpose of this slide and the previous slide is to say that as we're evolving, we have increasing amount of certainty on the timing and the quantum of our revenue compared to the previous years. The next slide talks about the electronic warfare. So DroneShield, as the name implies, has traditionally been dealing with the counter-drone space, and we continue being excited about that space and making very rapid increased sales in that area. However, we have discovered that a lot of our skill set that we developed chasing counter-drone opportunities is also highly applicable in the electronic warfare and the signals intelligence space. With that, we have now closed 2 contracts with the Australian Department of Defence and are delivering on the second larger $3.8 million contract. It is somewhat rare to have a small company with that capability, and usually it's a domain of defence primes. The governments are keen to support specialized small firms like ourselves to provide sovereign capability and encourage innovation in disruptive technologies. We have Australian government supporting DroneShield in exactly that reason, with exactly that background. Following on the $3.8 million contract, we expect additional and larger contracts as we continue to work with the customer on this 2-year contract that we only received last month. The demand for these technologies will continue increasing, and we also expect to be able to take our learnings and not only have them mean larger contracts here in Australia, but also potentially in the US. We believe there's no Australian competition for that kind of work, as been demonstrated by the $3.8 million contract being awarded to DroneShield on a sole source basis. The next slide deals further into the Australian government and the Australian defence industry. So as I mentioned at the start, Australian government has committed to a $270 billion in total capability investment over 10 years across acquisition and sustainment. A lot of that money, or as much as possible, will be fed through to local companies, as there's a clear priority by the Australian government to foster defence industry. As a provider of unique capabilities across counter-drone, electronic warfare, and signals intelligence, we believe that we have a role to play in that increasing budget and will continue to grow, being supported by the Australian government. The next and the last slide talks a little bit about us and how we evolved as a team. So we are now, as I mentioned, a 50-person company, a very engineering-heavy team. We work across a number of different areas. So 30 engineers may not sound like a lot, but by the time you look at all of our capabilities, it is really, really wide range. So anything from printed circuit board design out to complete product design, software engineering, FPGA engineering. We run all of our supply chain. We are effectively mini prime in our own little ecosystem. And this is just engineering. On top of that, we have highly capable sales teams, field service engineering teams, proposal writing team, as well as approximately 120 in-country partners around the globe. With that, I conclude the presentation and we'll turn to questions. So let's see which questions came through. So one of the questions is, what do we see as the near-term catalysts for the stock? At this point, I would say the near-term catalysts will be sales on the R&D contracts, and US and Australia would be the two main areas, as well as the Middle East. With the Middle Eastern deal we talked about for quite some time, there are additional newer deals in the market, which in the region that we expect to also being able to pursue, that we're in active discussions for. But in terms of new stuff that hasn't been previously announced and disclosed to market, I think US and Australia are single largest drivers, as long as UK and Europe also being on the radar as we develop. The status of the big Middle Eastern deal. So we already covered on that, I believe. So as I mentioned, it is not as transparent of a market as it is, say, with Australia and New Zealand. However, we are in active engagement. We are literally speaking through our on-the-ground partner with the customer every week. The contract is fully drafted. So the good and bad about it is that there are no intermediate stages left. The next stage is signing of the contract. So we are actively chasing it now. The next question is, why should investors not see this quarter as a one-off performance, but rather an ongoing trend? So it's all the factors I mentioned on the slide with the different trends, the key themes. So we have a pipeline that is becoming more transparent. We have built out the team. We have macroeconomic environment that's continuing to move in our favor. So I genuinely believe that we can have a stronger second half, potentially by a factor, compared to the first half of this year. The next question is, the shareholder is interested to know if the technology will be made available equally to Australia's allies and adversaries. That's an easy question to answer. So of course not. We run a defense business. Our sales are subject to defense export approvals. We are very conservative in how we sell. As some of you will know, there are gray lists and black lists. We don't deal with either. So the technology is available to Australia and its allies, and we're very strict about that. And it also applies to our supply chain too. The next question do we see the need to expand the workforce from the current 30 engineers and 50 employees, given the large growth potential ahead of you? We will expand opportunistically as it comes. The great thing about our current setup is we're not a consulting business swapping hours for dollars. We have a highly scalable operation, meaning the technology, the products, once they're developed, don't require any more engineers to maintain. The contracts, you can have a sales team in a highly efficient manner supported by distributors closing ever larger contracts. We do outsource production on larger scale. So we have our own in-house production capability. Some of you would have seen the ISO 9001 certification that we have recently put out. However, the idea is that for really large orders, that'll be done by our trusted outsourced manufacturers. We're working with a company in Adelaide here. And that way we're able to leverage on much larger opportunities without increasing staff. And by the way, we are starting production in the US as well to cater for that market specifically. The next question is, what is the maximum revenue generation possible from existing production capacity? So this links to our in-house versus outsourced production as well. So the idea is that as there is a need for increasing production capability, this is frankly not our headache. This is something that we'll work collaboratively with our outsourced manufacturing partners on. This is their decision to make, and they are large-scale manufacturing operations. They do not fully rely just on DroneShield's business, so they can have a significant increase in production capacity. One thing to keep in mind, right, is that the cheapest product we sell is in the order of tens of thousands of dollars. So you can have very meaningful revenues without thousands of products rolling off the pipeline. We're talking products, costing same as cars, more or less. The next question is, how does DroneShield sit compared to your top competitors? Are we a market leader or middle of the crowd? What's our competitive advantage? Look, when we started 5 or 6 years ago, we were the pioneer in the industry. There was virtually nobody else at the time, although the industry was really quite small as well in terms of the demand. Now, if you Google counter drone, you're probably going to see dozens of people pop up. Broadly speaking, what I'd say is that we have no true competition. What I mean by that is, first of all, defense primes are not our competitors. If anything, they're our customers, and you would have seen some of our work with Thales and others being in the news. So these people don't intend to enter into disruptive industries like counter drone, but rather rely on small and nimble participants like ourselves to source the equipment from. We are seeing some competition from mid-range competitors, sort of similar size to ourselves. Most of these people are single product companies. What I mean by that is, for example, they might do just handheld detection or handheld defeat. While we do handhelds, we do vehicle products, we do ship products, fixed site products. What it means is we can do more deployments, and two most common questions that people ask is, well, how much and where have you deployed? So deploying across more types of customers, airports, prisons, militaries, and so forth, deploying different types of products makes it easier for us to do sales. And a lot of technology is somewhat similar, repackaged in different kind of boxes. Also, we are a truly global company. I mentioned about 120 countries around the world. A lot of our competitors tend to be regional at best. And then, of course, we do not compete with, say, Chinese competitors, as those will not be purchased by most of our customer base. So I would say we're clearly market leader in the space. Don't get me wrong, in a lot of opportunities, we have to tender. In increasing amount of them, no, but we are in the government space. However, so long as you educate the customer on the unique features of your product and why those features are a requirement, then you put yourself in a favorable position across the tenders when those requirements are published in those tenders. We're also the only public listed company in the world, of course, in the counter-drone space. So move on to the next question. What CapEx do we expect to expand for the manufacturing facility in the US? The answer is 0. The facility is outsourced manufacturing, same as we do here in Australia. Next question, can we update on the US Department of Homeland Security trials? So the trials have been successful. This is an area where things potentially get fairly complicated, where you have a network of different agencies and they collectively evaluate and then they make purchasing decisions. So we are continuing to see increased cash receipts from US government agencies, and this trial will lead to further sales. So I cannot tell you, well, there is an outcome for X dollars next month. However, the way these things come about is you eventually get there, but you need to have socialization of different government agencies and all of them getting faith in you, and then you start seeing increasing contracts. So this was DHS trials were an important step. The next question, there's a lot of drone activity in India. Do you have sales relationship in India? The answer is yes. We have a distributor that we work with. We have done sales in India, and we are following up on those opportunities. Interestingly, so we talk about our technology partners, right? So Tracker Systems, that some of you may have seen, they do very high-end cameras. So we partner with them with our DroneOpt ID software. So they have made a lot of sales to the Indian military. So the reason why we partner with people like Tracker is not only for access to their technologies, but also access to the customer base. So that'll be another channel there into India. The next question is, do we see any technological trends in drone manufacturing that could negate DroneShield capabilities? Look, it's like an antivirus, right? So there is nothing in the immediate time frame that completely negates it, but something new always comes up, which is what supports our continued new product rollout. You would not want to have a product that customers buy once and kind of never have to touch again. So both in terms of hardware and software, we expect new capabilities to come out. People talk about 5G drones, drones underwater, drone swarming, autonomous drones. And today we already have answers to a lot of those questions, and effectively anything that people see in the field, we can deal with. But make no mistake, in 5 or 10 years' time, there's going to be new stuff that comes out. But that's the great thing about having a team that's highly technical and continues to stay on the edge. And I mean, that's at the end of the day how we earn high gross margins, where you have to sell products which are at the cutting edge of technology. I believe this concludes all the questions.
I think that's it. Yes, thank you, everybody. If we have missed anything, please feel free to reach out via the contact details on the bottom of our ASX announcements. And as I mentioned earlier, a copy of the recording will be available on the DroneShield website on www.droneshield.com/investors. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for your time, everybody.